Okay, now we're recording has started. So let me get my slides up. So everybody was able to access the slides. And again, you can use those slides also to reference the material that we're talking about today. And the link to the Padlet is in the slides. So we can always use as a working or living document, so we can always add ideas or strategies to that Padlet. All right, so here we go. Okay. So my first slide has my email information in case anybody needs to get in contact with me. It's Jose_Diaz followed by the number 1 at fitnyc.edu. So just to briefly outline the presentation, I'm just going to talk a little bit about lesson hooks, what it means to me as a student, but also as someone who trains faculty. And I'll talk about some of my fond memories as a student, and which memories stick out the most are those memories, those teachers who actually use learning lesson hooks to engage me and as a student. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll cover some strategies, some ideas that I've seen used, and then we'll go into a Padlet at the end to just share some strategies, and then we'll just leave it open to anyone who's willing to talk about and share ideas and strategies, and then we'll end it there for Q&A at the end. Okay, so here we go. Oops. So, oops, let me stop that right there. 1 second, my video started to play. All right, so here we go. So I just want to open up with a video, and I'm going to open that in YouTube. And I want to start playing around the 3-minute mark. So, so I just wanted to open up that video again, as we're using, as we're the workshop on lesson hook. You know, this is a great example of a lesson hook that I use here. Oops, yeah, here we go. Oops, let me not show that again. So that was an example of a lesson hook, right? You can open up the course, you can open up the lesson with a video, right? And right away, the idea is the lesson hook is an introduction, right? An opening to a lesson, and you want to grab the student's attention. So whether you use video, whether you start using storytelling or controversial topic or something that you want to right away grab the student's attention so that they're already engaged. It's similar to how every movie nowadays that comes out, the first 2 minutes or 5 minutes of the movie, it's a chase or something happening right away. You know, some action is happening. So you see that a lot in movies. You see that a lot in books as you're reading stories. Magicians use a lot of that. So it's just a way to grab your audience attention, and just like the name itself, a lesson, a hook, right? So we're getting them connected and focused on you. And so, for example, in this video on the Apollo 11, in order to reach the moon, you need an effective and impressive takeoff is critical, right? So you saw how in the video, you know, it is building the momentum. So there's like a narrative, it's a narrative arc that we're working here, right? So if you start with something and an idea, a video or music or whatever that is to grab the student's attention, and And basically, you're creating an opportunity to inject energy, right? So if you also have to be passionate. You got to show energy. You can't have a monotone voice. You have to speak lively and show that you're passionate about the subject, and so that the students themselves can also feel passionate. If they sense that, and students right away will know that this is something you really care for, most likely they will jump on board. And so basically those examples that I gave, what are lesson hooks? So just exactly what I just explained, but not only just a way to inject energy, is also you're creating a learning journey, right? You're creating an eagerness to find out more, right? So you kind of, in a sense, you're selling them something here, and hopefully they buy it. And the reason why lesson hooks work really well is because they frame thinking. So you kind of, sometimes it might not be evident at first, but you slowly reveal a little bit more, and you start revealing more and more, and they start to understand that you're framing it for them, and you're helping them frame, and you help them focus on the concept at hand, and you give them you give the learning objective context, right? So it's not only just something that you decide to put some chase scene, cop and robbery, or some action, or it has to frame the context of the learning objectives at hand. So I want to take this moment. Actually, I'm going to skip that for now, because this is where we're going to put some examples of lesson hooks. I'll come back to that in a moment. I want to talk a little bit about some examples of lesson hooks, like the one I used for this workshop. I had a video playing the beginning of the Apollo 11 launch. Everyone who was alive at that time and was watching on a TV, we were fortunate to have a TV, you know where you were, you know exactly what you were doing at that moment, because it's stuck. That was a moment in time that was a formative a moment that changed the way that the whole world saw each other, right? We saw ourselves as being capable to reach to the moons, the heavens, right? So it's just that lasting memory that you have of that moment. So not to say that you have to create something that dramatic, but it's with a little bit of help, with a little bit of creativity, you can create those memorable moments in the classroom with learning hooks. Another way is you can use musical hooks. You can use music to open up the class, to get your students thinking about what did the music represent. Let's say you're teaching history, and there's music from the time period. Again, that's another way that you can hook students into the topic or the lesson for the day. Storytelling is really, really popular and a great way to engage your students, right? So I like to call them golden nuggets. And as a student, I'm reflecting now on my student years, and I started to think about what were some memorable moments during my college years. And there was one professor who I admired so much. It was in the marketing professor, and I'm so surprised till this day that I never ended up doing marketing, because he was somebody I admired, and he would tell these amazing stories. There was one story that he would tell about branding, and he would tell us about the Chevy Nova, and how it was just a huge failure because the name Nova in Spanish meant doesn't go. And I mean, years and years later, this lesson is still stuck in my head. I can still remember clearly exactly what story he was telling and what he was wearing. And he would say things like, you have to dress like the British do. They stay cool and calm. So I can still recall quotes from a professor of mine years and years ago, because just the way that he was able to tell these stories, it was so he would tell them with so much passion, And I was like a little kid in the camp, like, we were camping and I'm listening to stories. I'm like so focused on what every word that came out of his mouth. Um, Another activity or another lesson hook that can be used, especially now during remote teaching, in which I've seen used very often nowadays, is using a Padlet activity where faculty actually have a Padlet, which is like a virtual board for students, to open up the class with a Padlet and have students go in from the beginning of the class and start working on a Padlet. And I have faculty tell me that the only problem with this lesson hook is that I can't get them off the Padlet. So that's interesting, right? Because from the lesson hook, you always have to have a transition, right? The lesson hook itself cannot be the lesson plan. It's just that beginning or introduction, the opening to the lesson that will grab the student's attention. You gotta always also work on the transition from the lesson hook into then the learning objectives at hand. That's also very important to know. Another lesson hook that could be used is reading some non-technical, reading an interesting article, right? We can take the moment that we're currently living right now in this political tension, right? There's a lot going on now, a lot of good material for history class, American history. That's a subject matter that you're teaching. I mean, right now the time is perfect to, bring up just what's going on right now with politics. So that's another way that you can bring in articles, and you can bring in newspaper article, current events to open up the class, and not along with politics, but also the pandemic, as we're all working remotely from home, and as students also having to work from home. And working from home provides another opportunity to create some other lesson hooks where you can use physical objects at home. Whether the students have to, if you're teaching textiles, right? That's a difficult subject now because you don't have a classroom that you can sit down with the class and show them the different fabrics, right? So how can we do that, right? So that's something else. That's another way that you can actually have students at home bring in materials that they have, clothing. Let's say we're talking about cotton, and so you can bring some material that they have at home and just try to use that as the best way, as opposed to giving up and say, well, I'm sorry, class, we don't have, we're not meeting in class today, we're working from home, so I can't really show you what this feels like, right? So you have to get out of that box and start getting more creative. Kinesthetic hooks, so that's like physical movements. I had a professor, I remember that it was a 3-hour long course, and he would stop halfway through the lesson and he would have us get up and start doing jumping jacks and doing something, physical activity. And I clearly remember that because, again, your leg starts falling asleep. You're getting screen fatigue now that we're all working remotely. So having them get up and dance, and even putting some music on to just get a break away from the monotony. So I mentioned controversial statements or hot topics. You can do things like that. Again, the whole idea is not to spend too much time. It doesn't have to take the whole class time to do these lesson hooks, right? If you're going above 5 minutes or more, you have to be careful because you're falling into the trap of the lesson hook itself becoming the lesson, right? You want to transition from the lesson hook into the lesson. And some just important points that I mentioned before, I just want to highlight before we go into the Padlet and we start working together, is lesson hooks will frame the thinking, right? So there's so much material out there. There's one book that I've been reading, is called Mastery by Robert Greene, and he basically uses storytelling to frame the topics that he's covering on mastery, apprenticeship, and learning how to follow your passion and whatever it is you want to do in life. So learning hooks also give the learning objectives context, right? So be careful at choosing what it is that you want to use as a lesson hook. For example, I use the Apollo rocket ship, right, as a countdown building up to the launch, taking us to the moon, right? So it's getting you from point A to point B to point C and so forth. So think about that. How there's so much material out there, and what is the right story to tell? What is the right video to show? What is the right material that you need to show to your students to get them engaged? You don't always have to use learning hooks, right? Not for every lesson. I mean, this is something that you can use from time to time, right? And again, it does take time because you have to go into do some research and look around, find the material, and how to apply that into your lesson. And like I mentioned before, learning hooks shouldn't take up too much of your class time. You don't want the lesson hook to become the actual lesson itself. I mentioned reading an interesting article. Learning hooks come in many categories and making them a flexible strategy. So by that, I'm trying to say that even if you find stories or examples that are not in the field that you're teaching, the profession, you can always find something that kind of connects in one way or another, right? So if you're running dry on finding material on how to create a learning hook for textiles, then you might want to you might want to do something like gamification, which is another way another way of inserting a learning hook, and not to put you on the spot, Lorenza, but Lorenza Wong and I, we worked on a game that we kind of used it as a learning hook, right? So gamification is a great way to hook your students in. We created an escape room, right, for reviewing midterms, and we had the students form into groups, and instead of doing a regular midterm review, we created a game that the students were so into, right? So again, it's the way that you approach your students, and if you don't know your students, it's very important to know who your audience is, because then you can really relate to them and you can really come up with some learning hooks that will attract the interest, right? So another way to create student profiles would be to using your icebreakers to create student profiles. If you create an icebreaker where students have to put their photo, talk a little bit about who they are, and from there you can take that and create that into a student profile, so that therefore from the student profile you can start building these lesson hooks, right? So that's also crucial, learning who your audience is, so that therefore you can create these lesson hooks. So that's pretty much my presentation. Oops, yeah, that was a slide I was supposed to cover. Understanding who your audience is can help you come up with effective lesson hooks. So creating student profiles, like I mentioned, creating surveys that you can ask your student questions and then build the student profiles from their responses, and saving these student profiles so that you can always come back to them, right? If you see students who are heavy into business management, fashion of business, you might want to then look into stories about people in that area, and that might be a great resource for storytelling, right? And don't forget that you worked in the business, right? That you have experience that they want to hear about. You might think it might be boring, or like, oh, I don't want to tell them about what I did in my job or what I did during my career. They love it when you talk about, and I call these golden nuggets. If you tell them little stories about how the fashion industry is and what I did and how I overcame these obstacles, students love to hear the stories because they want to see themselves in your shoes. Okay, and I think that's it for my slides. I think I heard a question, and let me go check real quick. Oh, yes, thank you, Meg. Which one was a cool idea?
I loved the idea of the gamification.
Oh yeah, the gamification?
And the escape room, that was very cool.
Definitely, yeah. We just did one workshop last week on gamification, and I had Lorenza Wong speak because she allowed me into her course, and we had an escape room. We created an escape room, and we were Lorenza Wong was teaching about. Maybe Lorenza, you want to talk a little bit about how the idea came out? I think Lorenza's there.
Yeah, we were just wanted to engage the students since we couldn't really uh, get together and hold swatches and pass around swatches. I thought it would be a great idea, although everyone got an opportunity to get a swatch kit. It would be nice to group them in teams and try to find swatches in the escape room that you've helped create for the review of the class. And I actually did the test already, and everybody answered very well when I shared again, not a game, but gave them pictures of swatches, and it was easy for them to identify. So I think they liked it. It gave them community and opportunity to teach one another.
I hope they all got the twill question correct this time.
I think 90% of them got it. Some just didn't do it right. I know, but anyway, it helped most of the students.
So, so another game that you can do, which is very easy, it doesn't take too much time to build, is using Kahoot is another great tool. It's free to use. There is a paid version, but Kahoot is a great way to introduce gamification into your classroom. If you, as a lesson hook, if you don't want to spend too much time developing the game. What I want to do now is I put the link in the chat room. If you don't mind clicking on that link and joining us in this Padlet that we all are in currently. And again, I did mention during my presentation that a Padlet activity in the beginning of the class is an effective lesson hook, a way to hook them into the lesson, right? So as you all know, what I keep hearing is the students love to use Padlet, right? So if you open up the class with a Padlet activity and get them to work in the beginning of the class, and you open up the Padlet to them, and then transition over from the Padlet then to something else, that is also an effective way to get them engaged. So what I want to do here is, if you want to participate in this activity, basically all you have to do is click on the link that I posted on the chat room. It will take you to this Padlet, and at the bottom right you have a hot pink plus sign. If you click on that, if you want to go ahead and start adding some strategies that you have implemented or that you want to share with everybody else in the room, please do so. Or if you want to add a story of when you were a student, a professor who used a lesson hook that you remember, and until this day you can remember exactly what he or she told you, that would be also that would be great if you can add that here. And while the board is being populated, I want to add one more story that going back now to third grade. I remember that we had a substitute teacher come in, and we were all surprised to see that it was my principal who was a substitute teacher. And he came in and he just gave the most memorable lesson that I could ever remember. To this day, I mean, so I was third grade, so I must have been, what, 8 or 9, I think. And till this day, I can remember him. And I can clearly see him working the audience, working the students with so much energy and fervor. Like, he was on top of it, right? And then years later, I remember him, and I wanted to come back and say hi and thank him. But unfortunately, I have found out that he had passed away. But just to have that fond memory of my teacher teaching us with so much energy, and that memory still, I kept that memory through the years. I thought that was, again, one of the best lesson hooks that I have ever seen from a substitute teacher. All right, great. So here we go. We have some people coming, some posts are coming in, and these are great. So yeah, I'll give it another minute or so I can see that some people still are typing in their answers or their posts. So going back to gamification, gamification is another great way not only for lesson hooks to open up with lesson hooks, but also to review the material just as we did for Lorenza's Wong course for her midterm exam. So lesson hooks, doesn't necessarily have to start at the beginning. You know, again, you can also incorporate lesson hooks every time you go in and introduce a new topic. So you can open with a lesson hook to introduce the topic and grab students' attention that way. All right, let's take a look. Let's see what we have here. And by the way, we can always refer back to this document and continue to use it and add more material if you're interested. And it could be a living document that we can always refer to. Oh wow, these are some great. So here we go. Here we have someone who's mentioned Pechakucha. Yes. I created my own Pechakucha presentation. I love these. So basically, and I don't know if anybody ever done a Pechakucha before. It's 20 slides, 20 seconds. So it puts you on the spot. I really love those. So that's a great way to introduce a unit on creativity. Students were later tasked with creating their own Pechakuchas. Here's the link to learn more about them. That's a really, really, really great way. It's like you can call that like a lightning round and have the students in the beginning of the class. All right, guys, get them all into it. I love that. That's a great one.
That's me.
Oh, Meg, thank you. Oh, by the way, if you don't want to show as anonymous, you can go ahead and put your name in there if you want to. Put your name on your post. That's a great one. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, this is okay. Here we go. So I remember a science teacher who demonstrated his faith in science by swinging a heavy pendulum and standing still while it stopped just short of his head. Who added this one? Antonia. Oh my gosh. I have something.
Someone else. That wasn't me.
I'm sorry.
I applied to it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. This one reminded me of I'm sorry. Go ahead, Antonia.
No, I was just saying that's great. I love that.
Yeah, that's a really good one. It reminded me of my own science teacher that he put a frog in a tank of water, and he put a cup over the frog so that the frog would not go above the water. And he said, "Well, okay, I'm going to let the frog drown." And we're all like, "No, don't kill the frog." And so that reminded me of that, but that's another way, right? That was another way that he was grabbing our attention and letting us, and teaching, it was a teachable moment for us, letting us know that the frog can breathe underwater. Here we go. In some of my classes, I asked the student to share how their week is like. I actually got the student to share, which live in the class lecture, tried Padlet activity as a breakout group, and I got to go around with a few students at a time, gamify the course for a test review tool, used Adobe Spark presentation to use for lecture presentation and video. Right. So that's you're using right here. You're definitely using different types of mediums, right? You're using games. You're using video. You're using that's a great approach, attacking it from all angles. Okay, here we go. Let's try it. Let's see what else we have here. So Rebecca says, I start every Italian class with a survey using the WebEx survey function in the target language. How is the weather? How are you feeling? What did you do last night? It helps them feel they have to do something right away and get involved. It is low stakes because they don't have to start speaking right away. And the key word there is low stakes, right? I love that. so that there is no pressure, right? Not only that, but it's, again, you're applying universal design, right? So you're allowing everyone to participate, not only the same students who always raise their hand. So what Rebecca's doing is applying universal design approach, right? So everybody has the opportunity to participate. That's a great example, Rebecca. Do you want to say something a little bit about that, or no?
I have to unmute. No, I mean, sometimes I feel like it's a little lame. So I like the idea better of using Padlet because it's visual,
Right.
and it's just more attractive. Also, I use Padlet. I've just started using Padlet, but I haven't used it at the beginning of class. But what I really like about it is this sort of sense that everybody's working on the same thing, and then it makes them all read whatever they wrote aloud, so that it isn't just that they did it, they have to sort of own it. And that also helps make sure absolutely everybody speaks in the class, which is good.
Right. I love what you said, Rebecca, that they feel like they're all part of it, right? And that's what Padlet does, is they're all working on the same board together. And so that fear that, one student is going to raise their hand and you have to stand up in front of the whole class, you kind of feel alone, and the anxiety level goes off the roof. And so I love that you have them all. They all have a stake, even though it's low stakes. They all have. They're all contributing to the same document, and they're working as a whole and learning from each other at the same time. Okay, let's see what else we have here. So Antonia has, on the first day of my high school photography class before digital photography, the teacher took us right away into the dark room and showed us the magic of developing an image. That hooked me right away and made learning the technical stuff easier to get through. And that's a great example of how we said that the hook brings context to the learning objectives, right? If you see it with your own eyes, the photo developing, and there's your why, right? There's your why to why am I taking this class, right? So showing them, right? So the lesson hook, in this case, is a great way to bring context to the subject matter at hand. It's a great example. Thank you, Antonia. You want to talk a little bit about that, Antonia?
Sure. Yeah, it was just seeing that, not only, like you said, did it put it in context and say, why am I learning how to do this? I was so excited to get to that day in the semester when we did it ourselves, that all that difficult technical stuff you have to learn when you're learning photography was tolerable, because I saw something in the future that I was going to get to do, and it wasn't abstract to me. It was like, one day I'm going to get to make that magic myself. So that was really fun.
Right. I love that you said magic, right? Because that's what magicians do, right? It's they capture you with that magic, right? And most of the time it's just an illusion, but you're seeing this photo develop right in front of your eyes. You're like, oh my gosh, isn't that amazing? It's like from a blank piece of paper to then this
Yeah.
that you created, and wanting to be able to do that encourages any student. I remember in photo class when we had to create the photo box. What was it called? Yeah.
We had to do that too, in like an oatmeal canister. Yeah.
Yep. That to me was like, oh my gosh, I can't afford a camera, but I had this box that I can actually use. And, it was just, to me, it was just magic in front of my eyes. So I was right away. That from photography, it led me to video, and then video to editing. And it was like a chain reaction from there. So let's look over here. Another person I use breakout sessions, Kahoot, polls, and the answer garden. So, yeah, what is the answer garden? If you want to elaborate a little more on that, who posted that?
That was me, Shelley.
Hey, Shelley.
Hey, how are you? So
Good.
the answer garden is cool. So I have problems using that whiteboard in Blackboard, because the questions get all crumpled together and stuff. So answer garden you set up a poll, a question, and then students, as they continue to answer the question, the garden grows. And so if a lot of people use a term, for example, like, I don't know, so say we're talking about retail and a lot of people say digital gets, the word gets bigger and bigger. So it's just a great visualization, and people can actually see the answers coming in.
Oh, I love that. It's similar to a word cloud, it sounds to me.
Okay.
Right. But you know what I love about using those type of strategies is that you can ask a question indirect to the subject matter or the lesson at hand, and knowing you're strategically placing that question because you know that most of the answers that you're going to get back are going to lead and transition over to the topic or the lesson.
Right, and sometimes I do it like if I had them, so let's say I had to read an article before class, I'll say, let's start beginning it with class about thoughts about the article. And then what I was going to plan to talk about the article might be a little different based on their feedback. I might completely change. Oh, wow, okay, now that you brought up these things, let's talk about that.
I love it. I love it. Again, you're applying universal design. Everybody's included. We're not we're not excluding anyone. Everyone's participating and together as a whole, right? The whole class, and everybody has an opportunity to participate. I gotta look up the answer garden. I also love the idea of visualizing a garden come together, like a community garden. I love that idea. Thank you for sharing that, Shelley.
Sure.
Let's see. Margaret's asking a question. Agree or disagree with remote learning? I'll make a controversial statement about the homework reading and then ask students, do they agree or disagree? Because those responses are built into Blackboard Collaborate. Then I ask the minority opinion to elaborate on their opinions, and that starts an enthusiastic discussion. I love these. I love when you cause chaos in the classroom. Good chaos. This is good chaos. and if I were to even add a little bit of healthy competition to Margaret's or Meg's suggestion, I would say that you can even create a Padlet where you have a debate going on where students who are for agree or disagree. If you agree, your post is going to be red. If you disagree, your post is going to be on blue. And I'm going to give them 15, 20 minutes to change another person in the opposing view to switch over to your side. And after 15 minutes, whichever team has the most people on their side wins the debate. Things like this. It takes a little bit of creativity, but right away to start off a class with a debate, I love the idea, Meg. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay, sorry, I had to get my mic on. I think what's nice is that in Blackboard Collaborate, if you hover over my status and settings, that icon on the left at the bottom of your screen, you can see there's an agree button and a disagree button. And so I do this, actually, I teach class from 6:20 to 9:10, so it's a long class, and so I interject agree or disagree often. If their minds are wandering, it brings them back right away because everybody wants to weigh in with their opinion. So I'll give, and this is with my graduate students, but I also used it with my undergrads in statistics. And that was super, like, even in statistics, I would say, agree or disagree. This is where I should do a one-tailed test. And one-tailed or two-tailed, right? So then we get into a conversation about should it be a one-tailed hypothesis test or a two-tailed hypothesis test. But so it works in lots of different situations, and everybody wants to weigh in and say, no, I disagree because it's blah blah blah, and then I'll say, okay, does someone want to respond to that? And somebody will be like, no, but that's not right. It should be blah blah blah. And so it naturally turns into an enthusiastic discussion. Everybody wants to weigh in with their opinion.
I love that you said that it's a natural, right? It happens naturally, and it can't be faked. And the beauty of that is I love when you get the ball rolling and then it just carries on its own, and you step back as a teacher, you become an observer. and you're kind of seeing it happen, it unfolds right before your eyes, and you're just observing your students go at it, go at it, and it's just, it's like, again, I want to use the word magical again, but that's the only way I can describe it whenever I see that happen, and once you get a good hang of doing the strategy, oh my gosh, it becomes natural. You start doing it, you start seeing it happen right before your eyes, and then you gotta pull them back in eventually. It could go on for the whole day sometimes.
It's really true, and I feel like a lot of times my job just becomes thanking people for their contribution, calling on other people, just saying like, what do you think about that? And then at the end, kind of wrapping it up, and that's way better than any lecture I could give.
Yeah, yeah. But one quick note on that, you have to avoid I don't know if you guys remember Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Remember that classic scene where the teacher is in the front of the class and he goes, yes, yes. And he's answering he'll ask a question and he gives up on the students and he's answering his own questions. I should have brought that clip. But it has to be very planned, right? So sometimes you're going to have students who don't want to participate. So you really have to, I know it sounds like, oh, that sounds easy to do. But again, when I try it in my class, I don't get anybody participating. Those kind of responses. So I'm not trying to say it's easy, but as Meg is saying, she's been doing this for a while, so it takes practice. Let's see if we have any other ones that I missed. Okay. Okay, here's one more. At the beginning of the class, I asked each student to sum up in one word how their internship experience is going. I used this several times over the course of the semester. I use it again to ask each intern to describe their internship company culture in one word. That way, everyone has an opportunity to reflect, contribute, and be heard. That's beautiful. Again, it's funny because all the examples that we've been sharing, also it's again universal design. We're including everyone, participating, allowing everyone to participate, inclusion, right? And so that you don't get the same few people every time raising their hand. I love it. This is great. Okay. Oh, this is Lee. Lee, can you talk a little bit about this, Lee?
Hi, Jose. What I need to talk about is how I don't know how to use Padlet. That was not mine. I wrote the one about the pendulum, and then I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to say it was mine. And then I tried to say how much I liked this one about the one word about the experience, and ended up claiming it, which is completely wrong and not what I meant to do. So I'm coming around on Padlet.
Hey, well, you're getting your hands dirty, right? So you're learning.
But it's not mine.
By the way, I love your pendulum. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because I had well, you automatically reminded me of my science teacher trying to drown the frog.
Well, that was a class I took as an undergrad called Physics for Poets, and it was extremely hard, and I didn't do very well in it. It was one of the lowest grades I got as an undergrad, but I'll never forget the day that the teacher stood there and he had a bowling ball-sized pendulum hanging from the hook at the top of, it was a huge auditorium, right, hanging from a long rope in an auditorium, and he walked to one side of the stage, brought it with him, held it right next to his head, let go, swung back all the way, high drama, swung back all the way across the stage, comes back, he's just standing there stock still. If it was, if it hit his head, it would knock him out. It just barely touches his ear and then goes back, and he says that proves his faith in science. I later realized he'd stolen that because it's in the novel Contact by Carl Sagan. Someone does it, or maybe they stole it from him. I don't know. But what I really like about the person that wrote the beginning of class is that the shortness and conciseness of this one. This activity where they ask them each student to share one word to describe their experience of their internship. It gets out of that lets everybody talk, and it also gets out of the problem of the lesson hook taking up too much time, and it forces people to come up with one word to express their experience. And I think that students would respond very well to that. And it also is verbal, which my whole objection to Padlet is I want them to be verbal because I feel like they know how to use images so much, and I want to ask them to communicate verbally.
Mhm.
Asking them to come up with the right word is a beautiful exercise. I think that's a terrific approach.
Yeah, yeah. And I hope he was wearing a helmet, by the way.
No, he wasn't. Oh, no. No helmet. I mean, he was putting his skull on the line.
So yeah, he's putting his life on the line for that lesson. So again, I mean, you don't have to go that far, but again, it's again, Oh, so by the way, that was Lisa Hubble. So Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about that activity that you do at the beginning of your class?
Well, I'm not being lazy, but I really feel like Lee elaborated on it beautifully.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. It reminds me of what Shelley was talking about too. Very similar, right? So again, to the word garden, I think it was, right? Yes, the answer garden. Sorry, the answer garden. Um, so okay, so I mean, these are great ideas, tips, and strategies to implement. Again, if you're somebody who's not heavy on technology, you don't have to you don't have to base your lesson hooks on technology. I know a professor who, and it's another example real quick before we end, is I remember a professor that opened up the class on bullying, and he had the students write on a piece of paper an experience that they had where they were being bullied, right? And so again, this is something again where everybody's working on it, right? So we all have a piece of it. We all have a stake on this activity. It's low, and I mean, this is a little bit more than low stakes because again, you're revealing something personal about you. What he did next was magical. What he did then is after the students wrote their story or their experience on a piece of paper, he then said to them, take that piece of paper, crumble it up and make it into a ball, right? And again, this happened in a physical classroom, so I don't know how you can do this in a virtual environment. So then he had them in the classroom get up from their seats and make a circle, right? So they made a circle, and he got in the middle of the circle, and then he started explaining to them his experience as a child being, as also his story about being bullied as a child. And then he stepped out of the circle and asked the students to throw the paper ball at each other, right? And that got them all excited, and that really lowered the anxiety level tremendously because now he converted the activity from something that was seeming very personal and tense and a memory that had negative connotation to it into a snowball fight. And then after they all threw their paper balls at each other, he said to them, "Okay, now pick up one of the snowballs from the floor." And he went around the room as every student read each other's personal story in front of the classroom. So now my story became someone else's story, right? So again, lowering the anxiety level, having to get up in front of the class and tell my personal story to someone, to the whole class. In this case, someone else was telling my story, and they were connecting to me in a similar fashion of how I was bullied. And I thought that was a fascinating way to again include everyone in, like we've been talking about universal design, include everyone, lowering the anxiety level, low stakes, and making it fun. And from there, he transitioned over to the lesson, right? So he went on from there on to transition from that short activity, and he had everybody hooked after that. So that's another one I really wanted to share. That one was very memorable to me. So that's basically it from me. I don't know if anybody else has any questions or any other comments that you want to make. I thank you all for coming by. I think it was a very fun workshop. And thank you for sharing with everyone your tips and strategies. Lisa saying the writing on a piece of paper, etc., sounds really spectacular. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Again, any topic, any topic that might be sensitive to the whole class, you can, turn it to a low stakes, fun activity, and that could be that can be used for any other. You can just take that example and convert it to your into your lesson hook. Yeah, the snowball idea. Thank you, Lee. I think I'll stop there unless anybody else has anything else they want to share before we close. I thank you all for coming by. We have this recorded, so I think this was such a great workshop. I'm going to probably ask Antonio, maybe I can put it up on the website, so maybe we can share this with anybody who's interested. Again, like all my workshops, I will follow up with a summary email with the links with the presentation slide, and links to other lesson hook ideas that we talked about. And yeah, thank you again. Thank you for coming by. Enjoy the rest of the day. Wow, we finished 5 minutes before 3. I usually go over.